All right, make sure you grab the handout on the way in. We got to finish up chapter 20, and then we'll start chapter 21. I have the session number wrong on the sheet. We're at like number 25 now. It's one of those things where I forget to change all the numbers. Like when I prepare the funeral worship folders, I always have to make sure, and Sherry knows this too, and sometimes I was looking at Maya's, and I still had one name wrong in that final one too, so sometimes I miss those things. Are you going to be Steiner today? I would say we could almost finish the whole book of Revelation, as I say. You got shoes on. Just reminding ourselves where we are here at the end of the book of Revelation. The Lord disposed of the two great beasts who served the dragon, the devil, and working against God's kingdom, his church, his people, carrying out persecutions, being the source of false teaching and the apostasy in the church. So the beast out of the sea and the beast out of the earth, the secular governments used by the devil to work against his church, and the powers within the church that the devil uses against the church. So we disposed of those, the Lord disposed of those, and now we had one enemy left, and that is the great dragon, the devil himself, which is the culmination of the book of Revelation. And you remember, we finished just briefly looking at the end of the devil here in verses 7 through 10, and it was like, boop, God wins. That's it. I mean, you'd think there'd be this grand spectacle of the defeat of Satan. That's what I have the image in our mind. And nope, it's fire came down from God and devoured them. That's it, right? And we talked about that last time. Now what we have is this idea of the final judgment to wrap up here, and I wanted to take a little bit more time so we understand the set. So we're still in the defeat of Satan here at the end, the final judgment, and then we make the transition in 21 and 22 to the glorious vision of the triumphant church in heaven, some of the more familiar sections of the book of Revelation. So, Revelation 20 here, we finish up again. The closing thoughts of Satan right there, I referred to them. I'll read them again, and then the final judgment. We have a few questions here. Satan defeated. When the 1,000 years come to an end, Satan will be released from his prison. He will go out to deceive the nations that are in the four corners of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them for battle. They are as numerous as the sand of the sea. They came up over the broad expanse of the earth. They surrounded the camp of the saints and the beloved city, and fire came down from God out of heaven and devoured them. And the devil who deceived them was thrown into the lake of fire and sulfur, where the beast and the false prophet are. There they will be tormented day and night forever and ever. Then I saw a great white throne, and one who sat on it. The earth and the sky fled from his presence, and no place was found for them. I also saw the dead, great and small, standing in front of the throne, and books were opened. Another book was also opened, which is the book of life. The dead were judged by the things written in the books, according to what they had done. The sea gave up the dead that were in it, and the death and the grave gave up the dead that were in them, and they were judged, each one according to what he had done. Death and the grave were thrown into the lake of fire. The lake of fire is the second death. If anyone's name was not found written in the book of life, he was thrown into the lake of fire. And remember, we talked about the first death is our physical death, second death is eternal death. First rising, resurrection, is our conversion. Second rising is the resurrection to eternal life. And soul and body are brought back together again. Okay, here in this second section, or last section of chapter 20, verses 11 through 15, we have these two sets of books. First of all, back up. It's obvious that we have judgment happening. Of course, who's the judge? More specifically, Jesus is the judge. He says in Matthew 25, he will sit on his throne. The Son of Man will sit on his throne and judge the nation. There's a really interesting thought, especially in that idea. Why Jesus? Why Jesus be the judge? And it's specific there, the Son of Man will be judge. What's that point of the Son of Man? He's the Son of God as well. You think a beautiful Savior, right? Son of God and Son of Man. Right, Son of Man emphasizes as what? Exactly, it emphasizes humanity. So why would we have that emphasis on Jesus' humanity as being the one who is judge? Todd's got a thought? Or are you just giving me thumbs up? Go ahead. Mm-hmm.
Maybe we did difficult things we didn't get to see at all, anything, and be surprised by how we're saved. But there is no surprise. Jesus showed himself on this earth. Man saw him, man believed, or he did believe.
What do we refer to juries in our judicial system? A jury of one's peers, right? That's what Christ is to us in his humanity. He is our peer. Yeah, absolutely. This is one that we're familiar with. We can't say, oh, you don't know what it's like to live our life. You get your judgments wrong because you haven't lived this. No, none of that. This certainly emphasizes the rightness of Christ's judgment when he makes that judgment. Anyhow, he's the one on the throne. Notice who also is raised from the dead. I'm probably not in the questions quite yet, but often misunderstood. And this goes into rapture idea too, from Thessalonians. On the last day, for judgment, who are raised? All the dead. Believers and unbelievers. Right? Jesus makes that same emphasis again, Matthew 24 and 25. You think of the sheep and the goats. The dead will be raised. The sheep on the right, the goats on the left. All the dead are raised. And that happens in the power of Jesus' resurrection. He's the one who's destroyed the power of physical death. And even those who are raised to live, to die forever in hell, are raised by Jesus' resurrection as well. So both the dead and both unbeliever and believer who are dead will be raised on that last day. So I saw the dead, great and small, standing in front. Okay, now we have the questions. Number 12. How many different sets of books are opened? There are two sets of books. On one side, you have a set of many books. On the other hand, you have one book. What are the difference between the books? So you have the one set of many volumes on one side, and you have the one book on the other side. Let's start with the one set of many volumes. Those are books of what? Oh, what's written in them? Would that be their what? Yes, that's the set I'm talking about, yep. So what's in that set? What's written in that set? I alluded this to the sermon last week. In Psalm 130? Yeah, Psalm 130. If you, O Lord, kept a record of sin, who could stand? But it's not just sin, it's all deeds, right? Well, of course, all deeds done by a sinner are impacted and infected with sin. Even our righteous acts are as filthy rags. So the books, the one set that contains many volumes, are the record of deeds. Where one could go through and see all that we've done. And the unbelievers are judged on the basis of what they have done. What's the other book? Let's get that out of the way first. Book of Life. What's written in that book? Not deeds, but names. Just think about that a second. Vast difference between books that contain deeds and a book that has names written in it. Of course, we know those that are judged by these books are which ones? The unbelievers. Those who are judged according to this book are believers, right? So I like to look at, I want to keep my thoughts as tight as I can here, so I'm not like the missile that just blasts all over the place. What is this emphasizing? What is it not emphasizing? How are people not saved? By what they do. It's because their name is written in the book of life. Who's done that? Only God does that, right? Why are those who are unbelievers judged according to their deeds? Because without faith, that's all they have. And they will be judged eternally for it. Their sins remain, the blood of... and that's the fascinating thing is, when you get to the side of the faithful, there's no mention of works whatsoever. At least here there's not, right? Because that was Christ. It's received by faith. There's all kinds of places you could go with this. I like to refer to this section as the reconciling of the books in a way. We talk about that in accounting all the time, but you're comparing the two books, right? Those who are judged by their deeds, their names are not found here. Those whose names are found here are not judged by their acts of sin. So then think about, this is often a tough one to wrangle with in our heads, because we have that great Lutheran tendency of rightly dividing law and gospel. In anything that smacks of work righteousness, we just go, yeah, right? And so what one parable of Jesus do we often struggle with that reflects this matter of Judgment Day? Matthew 25. Yeah. And what does the master say? To those on his left, before he said, "Depart from me into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels," he says, "I was thirsty and you did not give me to drink. I was in prison and you did not visit me," right? So there's that list of the deeds. But then to the righteous he says, what? "I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was hungry and you fed me. I was in prison and you came to visit me." Oh, that means we're judged on the basis of works. No. I suppose if that was the only, place in Scripture where we have this described for us, one might be led to that conclusion. But how do we explain and understand that?
Those things came out of faith.
They were worked by faith, yeah. Because guess what? From earthly standpoint, have unbelievers fed the hungry and given drink to the thirsty? Are they going to be in heaven because they didn't do? And it's deeds done by faith. No sin is there when washed away by the blood of Christ. There's another important little detail that many overlook. When Jesus gives the reward to those who had done good, to those who fed and gave to drink, what does he say? "Come, take your inheritance." What's important of the idea of inheritance? Yeah, the inheritance depends on the one who's giving it, not based in works at all. I mean, the essential, we could have a movie like Mr. Deeds where a person has to do something in order to obtain it, but that's not the sense at all here. Inheritance has no connection to what you've done. You get it because of your relationship with the one who gives. Completely unearned is inheritance. Inherit the kingdom prepared for you. So just to keep some of those things straight in our minds. So the differences between the two sets of books: the one contains the records of deeds of unbelievers, the other contains the book of names who are written in the Lamb's book of life. By the way, I'm not going to pick out all of the connections with the beginning of the book, but if you think back to chapters 1, 2, 3, we're going to see a lot of connections, and this is one of them. We'll see more in the next section too, when the Lord refers to himself or addresses the people. What is significant that the book of life is mentioned now 7 times? This isn't the first time. This is the 7th time the book of life is specifically mentioned. Numbers, Dr. Backus. That's 10.
So, but we have the triune God and we have the four corners.
Yes.
So that's not, what is that?
Well, that's 3 plus 4, so that would, or that's not, no, sorry, 3 plus 4 is 7, right? Yeah, 7, right? Yeah, exactly. I was thinking 7 plus 3, but yeah, I'm terrible at math, by the way. Yeah, you're exactly on the right track. So 4, think 4 corners of the earth, 4 people, right? 3 is God. So when we have 3, 4 equals 7, that's could be the church in its most specific sense, but God with people. God's covenant, that's his covenant number, sorry. I readjust this thing a little bit. So God's covenant, excuse me, God's covenant number, his relationship, his interaction with humanity, especially in order to bring them salvation. So there we have 7 books, which reminds us not so much of completeness as it does certainty. You know, if we heard it once, maybe there was a name stamped in there that wasn't supposed to be stamped in there. Maybe somebody's got no. If you do something 7 times, it's probably going to stick, that idea. The absolute certainty that we have that this is exactly the records as it is supposed to be, believer and unbeliever. So the reconciling of the books, the book of deeds, the books of deeds, and the book of life. Of course, connection with the name written in the book of life, also connected with our sacrament of holy baptism. When the name of God is put on his people, but that's also the time when the Christian was given his Christian name. So how does this show us clearly the path of salvation? I just mentioned that. Only through God, only by God, and therefore absolutely certain. I think of this as like the guest list, somewhat similar to the parable of the wedding garment, wedding banquet too. Who gets in? Everyone whose name's written in the book. I don't think we ever, I've seen it in movies, where they have the guest list sitting out here and they got to look and see, is your name on here? We don't do those kinds of things much anymore, do we? But we're familiar with it in the pastime. If your name's not written in the book, you are not getting into the wedding feast, which is chapter 21. But before I go on, is there any questions or comments about anything? All right, chapter 21. We're only going to go through verses 1 through 8 today, and it'll give us plenty to talk about. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, because the first heaven and first earth had passed away, and the sea no longer existed. And I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And from the throne I heard a loud voice that said, "Look, God's dwelling is with people. He will dwell with them, and they will be his people. God himself will be with them, and he will be their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death or sorrow or crying or pain, because the former things have passed away." The one who was seated on the throne said to me, "Look, I am making everything new." He also said to me, "Write, for these words are trustworthy and true." And he said to me, "It is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. To anyone who is thirsty, I will give freely from the spring of the water of life. The one who overcomes will inherit these things. I will be his God, and he will be my son. But those who are cowardly, unbelieving, detestable, murderers, adulterers, sorcerers, idolaters, and all the liars will have their share in the lake burning with fire and sulfur, which is the second death." So after the defeat of the devil, the Lord creates, I say, a new kingdom. We could call it that. We talked about his kingdom in our hearts and his kingdom's work here on earth. I think it's only fitting to talk about the culmination of our salvation as being a kingdom as well, for his victorious people. And the Lord makes a number of beautiful promises to his people, and some of which we're going to go through, and of course they continue on in chapters 21 and 22. Let's see here. Just to get a couple things straight before we get into... No, we're going to talk about it there. There was one thing. Okay. We're going to come back to the passages from Isaiah sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself in my head. All right, so what is this matter of the new heaven and new earth? First heaven and first earth had passed away. The sea no longer existed. I was a little surprised as I was reviewing this because it's been a while. There's a lot of differences in interpretation, even in the Orthodox circles, Lutheran Orthodox circles, of whether the world as we know it will be completely destroyed and God starting over something completely new, or whether parts of this creation will be used to make the new creation. And there's a reason for that. We automatically think, well, new, because the old has been destroyed. That could just be a way of talking about what he's seeing. And the reason why there are some differences in how theologians understand this is mostly tied up with the words that are used. Making, let's see here, verse 7. Yeah, look, I am making everything new. That's a different word than, this is Greek, but if we go in the Greek Old Testament, the Septuagint, making is not the same word as creating. Creating has that overtone of creating out of nothing. We think of what matter. God had to create matter before He formed the heavens and the earth. How did that all happen? I don't know. We do know He created everything out of nothing. Of course, there are some that even argue that, but I don't buy it. But here it seems as if He's using something that's already there in a way. And so we've talked about the newness before. Is it something completely different, or is it a new experience, or is it new, in another kind of sense? Like, what's new especially about this experience and this creation? There's no sin in it. I mean, just think it, if we would take this world as we know it and purge it away from all sin, and it still be the matter that it's made up of, would we still consider it new if it was without sin? I should say, yeah, it's brand new, right? Yeah. Not almost like brand new, but brand new. And right there is where the heart of the matter lies in the big argument theologically, is because out of Gnosticism, remember Gnosticism? Talked about that, before the pandemic. We did Corinthians, right? Yeah. What was on the basic tenets of Gnosticism? Regarding matter. Matter is evil. All matter is bad. And therefore, a lot of people understood this. Well, we're talking about heaven. We can't be dealing with matter because matter is evil, matter is bad. But then Orthodox theologian says, wait a second. What about my glorified body? What's that made up of? Marshmallows? Probably not. It's made up of matter, right? God made matter too. So in itself, it can't be evil. Essentially, it's the sin that makes it evil. So if we purge sin out of something, it's as if it is actually new. But we kind of got in the weeds there, and your eyes glazed over. You're like this. I don't need Bible. All right. New heavens, new earth. There's other references to it here. Again, what is really new about this is, well, we'll get to that. That's positive and negatives of things, but that we are going to live in a new creation of some sort. Isaiah 66, for just as the new heavens and the new earth that I am making will remain standing before me, declares the Lord, in the same way your offspring and your name will stand. 1 Peter 3, but the day of the Lord will come like a thief. On that day the heavens will pass away with a roar, the elements be dissolved as they burn with great heat. The earth and what was done on it will be burned up. Therefore, since all these things will be destroyed, what kind of people ought you to be? Living in holiness and godliness, as you look forward to and hasten the coming of the day of God. That day will cause the heavens to be set on fire and destroyed, and the elements to melt as they burn with great heat. But according to His promises, we look forward to a new heavens and a new earth in which righteousness dwells. Notice there too, new earth. We're not just going to be suspended in space or something like that. We're not going to be in the clouds, right? And again, when we're talking about what this new experience is going to be like, we can only talk about it really in terms of what we know and experience now, right? Like a place. It's just hard to put it into words. We're going to talk more about that later. In fact, finally, then creation. This is Romans 6. In fact, creation is waiting with eager longing for the sons of God to be revealed. For creation was subjected to futility, not by its own will, but by the will of the one who subjected it, in the hope that even creation itself will be set free from slavery to corruption in order to share in the glorious freedom of the children of God. Notice how the renewal of creation is described there. It's not described as something that's going to be destroyed, but something that's going to be liberated from. More so, right? So it's new in the sense that it's no longer under the curse of sin. So why is it special to see that the Lord will make a new heaven and new earth for his people? And here's where I like to describe, or we can categorize, I just want to make sure I don't get too far ahead of myself, we can categorize the experience of eternity both on a positive side and on a negative side. What do I mean by that? Look at heaven and what will we have? Look at heaven and what we will be without. See, that's positive, what we have. Negative is what we're without. So you just want to glance at it and look at it that way. And then consider the question, why is it special? The Lord's going to make a new heaven and new earth. And you can look at it this way then. Also, from this side of things, look at the deficiencies of this existence, this heaven, not just that humanity, but on the earth. Why couldn't this earth be the eternal dwelling place for his people? Why wouldn't it? Exactly, right? Everything here is still under the curse of sin, right? And it breaks and is destroyed, and buildings fall down. And what's wrong with this creation in order to be an eternal dwelling place for God's people is that it can't be eternal. As it is right now, it just cannot be. Something has to completely change about it, essentially, for it to be that. Go ahead, Barb. Mm-hmm. Right, if the building's about ready to fall down, you're going to stand there as you see the roof crumble. Oh, the roof's going to fall in on me. I think I'm going to... No, exactly, right. You're not going to do that, right?
I sometimes wonder, before sin entered the Garden of Eden, if that may not be what heaven would be like.
Sure. I think there's a lot of similarities we could draw from that, but I would argue that it's going to be better than Eden. It will be. It'll be like Eden, in the sense there's no sin. It's a perfect relationship with God. We're going to hang ahead of ourselves a little bit, but yeah, Luke. Yeah, it would do. Yeah, if that's always the big what if, Luke, right? Yeah, exactly right. And yeah, we would have, Adam and Eve would have lived forever, and that's just would have, yeah, that'd be kind of a full earth, though, wouldn't it? Yeah, no. And by asking that question, Luke, you really opened up part of what I want to talk about. How typically do we think of the experience of heaven? In what terms? What's that? Well, sure, but even if we try to describe what it's going to be like.
I think it's beyond description.
Why?
Because we have no idea of everything that would be included in it. It's beyond us.
Mm-hmm. But yet in our minds, do we have some kind of, if I'm going to want heaven to be like something, it's going to be like blank. What terms do we construct heaven in? No, what's that? Amazing. Okay. I'm not making my point. We can only think we tend to only think in heaven in terms of like what we already know and have experienced in our life. So we think of heaven going to be like this, only better, or this only without this, rather than some kind of whole different experience. And so with the catechism students, I say, what's your favorite food? Chocolate. So what's heaven going to be like? Well, heaven's going to be filled with chocolate. Guess what? Chocolate's probably not going to exist in heaven. Oh, my wife would have a fit. There better be chocolate in heaven, right? But there's something better than chocolate. Can you imagine that? We don't even know what it is. Now there's the question, right? In heaven there is no beer. Isn't that how the song goes? Right. Well, yeah, there is that feast, the fruit of the vine, right? Yeah. I guess my point is you see the limitations of our ability to understand what this experience is like. Even as we try to grasp it, we'll still only frame it in terms of our own present experience. It's going to be like this, only it's going to be like that. That's the only way we can do it as a human being, rather than just wipe the slate clean and say it's not. I just have no idea. Okay. I think that's, when we see the Bible references too, even as St. John tries to put it in his own words, he can't. These black and white words, as much as they do to describe the experience of eternity for us, still fall short, because in our current place in the human existence, we just can't grasp it reasonably in our minds. It's just impossible. There's a note here, it may have struck you, about the sea. Why would the Lord create this new world with no sea? Hint, think of where John was when he was writing this. Remember where he was? On an island of Patmos, surrounded by water, right? When you're on an island, you're kind of trapped. You have no access to anybody else. You just imagine, again, it has to be a different creation of some sort, because what is most of the... This is a fascinating thought, and I don't want to allegorize too much, but this whole matter of water and seas, most of the crust of the earth is what? Levi, you know this. What percentage? I could probably ask you this, and maybe you don't. I think it's at least that, maybe even more than that. Is water, right? When you read the Genesis account before Noah, you have the 4 rivers mentioned, but beside that, nothing. And even when the flood happens, there seems to be some weird things going on. Hydrological system was completely different back then. It almost seems as if when the flood happened, it was the first time rain actually came from up there. If you read it carefully. What watered the earth? The springs underneath the soil is what kept the earth and provided the rivers. Then the flood happened. And now what is the world mostly covered with? Again, I don't want to allegorize too much, but could this not be a constant reminder of our separation, the separation of the sinner from God, and the separation of the sinner from each other, and what sin does to us and each other? And it's, I kind of get that sense, because now what's going to happen on this last day? Everything, even what the flood has done is reversed in this new creation. Interesting thoughts. Again, completely unable to wrap our minds around it and comprehend it. Okay, so now, we'll get to that in just a second. Now we have to identify exactly what we have. So we have the first heaven and first earth passing away, and the sea no longer existed. There's a new heaven and new earth. Which is what would we call the new heaven and new earth? We just want to, what is it? It is heaven with a capital H, right? Because the other issue we have here is when we talk about heavens, we're often referring to the stuff up in the sky, like the sun, moon, stars, the actual sky itself. So when you got the interplay here, and you got all these heavens, well, we're talking about the heavens, like in 1 Peter, we're talking about the stars and stuff like that. So the new heavens and new earth, we could say, is heaven with a big H. So then what is the holy city? The New Jerusalem. What is the holy city in the New Jerusalem? That is not heaven. Dave. It's the church. Because look how it's described, right? The holy city, the New Jerusalem, coming down from out of heaven, from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. Whenever you hear that language, you're automatically thinking church. What is the bride of Christ? This wedding picture is just absolutely sublime. So, what is the holy city that John sees? It is the eternal church. As Dave said, the saints of all time, in all places. So those that were dead, that were raised and glorified, their bodies; those who are living, bodies also glorified, according to Christ's resurrection. How is the holy city described in verse 2? It's described as a bride. Notice, how is the bride made so beautiful? The bride is prepared. Everything is done to her. There's nothing she can do to make herself acceptable to her groom, to her husband, the Lord Christ. And yet, Christ is the one who has done everything. And I love, you try to picture this in an earthly scene too. How does this procession work? Who's the groom? Who's the husband? That is Christ. Who is the bride but his church? And who's escorting the bride down the aisle? God himself. This makes your spine tingle, right? Why is this significant? This is just the culmination of what you think of Ephesians chapter 5. The bride's made ready. There's nothing she can do to do it. You notice the bridal clothes that she's wearing, of course, those won for her, purchased by Christ himself, the husband, the groom, for her to wear at her wedding with him. And so you think of the relationship, and then you think of how this helps us understand Ephesians 5 as well. Wives, submit to your husbands as to the Lord. Oh, please don't say that at my wedding. Tough, the Lord says it. I have had brides ask me that. Nobody's won that argument with me yet. You think about the relationship between husband and wife as connected with the relationship with Christ and his church. Right? What has Christ done for her? Everything. How has Christ loved her? Perfect in every way. And I asked the wife then, well, wouldn't you want to be in a relationship where you're loved perfectly by your husband and he does everything for you? Oh yeah, I want that. I don't want to submit. Well, that's what submit means. Oh, well, I guess you can say that at my wedding then. Yeah. Of course, it's almost to the point now where marriages are getting easier than funerals. Funerals sometimes are tough. All right. I said before, the experience of heaven described both in the positive and negative. So now as you looked at it, what's the positive? What are the things we experience in heaven? What do we have? Experience of heaven. What do we have? Yeah. Okay. I'm focusing more here on these verses, so especially verses 3, 4, 5. What is in heaven that we will experience? The full presence of God. Is God with me every day right now? Yes. Do I sense him? Do I see him? No. Right? So you think of that grand undoing of what sin had caused. We talk, this is the restoration of the image of God, right? We talked about the image of God, and the catechism students were examined a few weeks back. Did you have these questions? Image of God? No, you didn't have image of God? No, that's right. You had the commandments you started off with, right? I think so. No? What did you? I can't remember what you had. That was too long ago. Image of God. Perfect relationship with God, like God in every way, right? Perfect knowledge of God. right? We won't have to wonder, oh, is that bright light God? No, it is God. I will be with them. God's dwelling is with his people, physically, visibly. So we have God, right? I think you could say we have each other too. That's certainly in here. If we're counted among the saints, then we're definitely together. Right? God himself will be with them. There, and that's what's emphasized the most here, is the thing that we have now is the fullness of a perfect relationship with God that we don't know in this life. Now, negatives. What don't we have? Look at verse 4. What don't we have? No more. Yeah, you think, okay, you're going to pack a lot in this, right? Do they still make Johnson's baby shampoo? The old yellow stuff? Remember what it said on the bottle? No more tears. It still stung my eyes. I don't know about you. Sorry. I think I used that stuff till I was in high school. Then I wasn't going to take it in the dorm at MLS. Look, I'm using baby shampoo yet. Anyhow. No more tears. Wipe away every tear from their eyes. Also, no more what? Death, or sorrow, or crying, or pain, because the former things have passed away. Go back to Genesis 3. After he says, I'll put enmity between you and the woman, then what happens is the consequences of sin. You know, your desire will be for your husband. He'll rule over you, right? By the sweat of your brow, excuse me, you'll toil until from the dust you are taken, for dust you are, and to dust you shall return. You know, this is the undoing of the consequences of sin and the curse of sin in Genesis 3. So, positive, perfect experience, relationship with God. Negative, none of the sin. Well, I gave that away. What causes the tears and the death and the sorrow and the crying and pain? It's all sin. So, what's not in heaven? No sin whatsoever. Verse 8 emphasizes that as well. You think about that. Verse 8 almost kind of seems like, why did he add that? Why did you have to remind me of the people that I know and the friends that I have who are unbelievers who aren't going to be in heaven? That's not what he's doing. What is he doing by adding that verse? Those who are cowardly, unbelieving, detestable, murderers, adulterers. What's the point of that? What does it seem like for it? Well, go ahead, Pat.
They're separated from believers.
Right? Good. Joni.
Maybe giving the reader the opportunity to repent.
I think that's part of it. Absolutely. I mean, we've talked about this in the past few weeks too. What does it seem like for God's people in the church militant? What does it seem like? Who wins in this? Who wins in this life? Who loses in this life? Seems like the faithful are the losers, and the unbelievers are the winners, right? No. It's in a way it's another word of comfort, right? Don't think, Jesus is saying, that after all that you've gone through, those who don't deserve to be here are here. Because, boy, you know, that's an awful feeling that we have in our lives, right? When somebody is given credit for what we've done or things like that. Granted, we don't get in heaven because of what we've done, right? But we don't want any of it soiled, in a sense, in any way. Because that would just be soiling what Christ has done for his people. Any other thoughts, Dave? Mm-hmm. Yep. And notice there too, you know, it is striking when you look at that category of sins, because who would the cowardly be referring to, you think? And why would we, you know, why would a cowardly person be as evil as a murderer? Well, sin is sin, right? But who are the cowardly? Who would the cowardly be? You got to think in terms of the context of Revelation, of when John wrote it. What was going on in the church? Persecution was. And so what was happening? A lot of people were saying, I'm not a Christian, don't cut my head off, don't feed me the lions. Which is why the solemn promise we make at confirmation, to cling to all these things even to the point of death, is not just empty words. It's a faith to die for. Literally, faith to die for. The cowardly there would be the ones that have given up their faith in the face of persecution. Of course, we have many thoughts in our hearts and our minds as we go through this. The idea of the living water, I think this is another important connection here, because we get it at the end of the New Testament, end of Revelation, and we have these overtones about, to anyone who is thirsty, I will give freely from the spring of the water of life, which is almost exactly what we hear in Isaiah 55, right? Hey, all of you who are thirsty, come to the water, even if you have no money. Come buy and eat. Come buy wine, milk without money, without cost. Why do you spend money on something that is not bread? Why do you waste your labor on something that does not satisfy? Listen carefully to me. Eat what is good. Satisfy your appetite with rich food. Turn your ear toward me and come to me. Listen so that you may continue to live. The question I have in all this is, if you read Revelation and you don't see the connection with the Old Testament throughout, and Ezekiel especially too, but also here in Isaiah, boy, you are really thick-headed too. And whenever I go through this, the Jewish faith and religion still makes me scratch my head how, they're so blind to Christ. I just don't get it. It goes the other way. That's happened, unfortunately. Yeah. And of course, Jesus talks about himself being the living water to the woman at the well. Everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again, but whoever drinks the water I will give him will never be thirsty again. Rather, the water I give him will become in him a spring of water, bubbling up to eternal life. Give me some of this water, he says. So the picture of that one and the understanding of that is clear. All right, how is it possible? The only way that we can enjoy this blessed existence, particularly focusing on 5, 6, and 7. Oh, notice how the Lord refers to himself. Remember, I talked about the connection with the beginning of the book. It was at the beginning of the book where the Lord called himself the Alpha and Omega, right? Look especially at verse 7. There it is, right? To him who overcomes. Does that ring a bell? Bending your brain a little bit here. I know it goes back to like last July. Sorry, microphone, really hot. The letter to the church in Sardis, to the one who overcomes, what does he get? What's that? Yeah, but there's the letter to Sardis talks about one particular thing. Well, maybe I'm crossing up. No, I am crossing up. I'm thinking of the crown of life, but that's a different letter. No, the letter to Sardis is the one to him who overcomes. I think it might be the living water. Do you have your Bible? No, you don't have it handy right now. I can't read my notes, so I don't know. Anyhow, that idea of the matter of to him who overcomes, that comes out from chapter 3. But notice especially verse 7. I will be his God, and he will be my son. The only way we can enjoy this blessed existence. Being what? Children of God. Relationship, right? Not a false relationship built on false premises. Of course, children of God, living water, baptism, lots of things there, right? And is there a chance that those who put their trust in the Lord will be disappointed? No, not a chance at all. I think that's the point I was trying to make with verse 8. That matter of just, am I going to get to heaven and think to myself, oh, this is not what I hoped it would be, and therefore it's awful. You've done that before, right? Go to Disney World. Oh man, Disney World just isn't what I thought it would be. Well, it ain't gonna be that way in heaven. We have, expectations for things. Just think of the expectations that we have in this life and how so often they are not met. It may be a great experience, but it's still not what we expected. It is not going to be that way in heaven. It's going to far exceed our expectations. Notice also the point of comparison between believers and unbelievers in verses 7 and 8. What's significant about this? That category of unbelievers, what does it focus on? It just doesn't say they're unbelievers. It does say that, but it says there are a lot of other things too. Based on what? A murderer is someone who does what? Murders. An adulterer is someone who commits adultery, right? Go back to the end of the last chapter. How are the unbelievers judged? By what books? Deeds. Notice here when it talks about those in heaven, is there anything mentioned about what they did? No. They are sons of God. Relationship. Names. All becomes important, obviously. And so there's definitely that connection there. Nothing is said about the deeds of believers. Excuse me. Nothing is said about the deeds of believers. Only their relationship and their connection with God and the experience that they're going to have in heaven. And of course, that's always striking because the way life operates all the time, it's based on what you do, not just the opinion legis in man, but just how you always, you get what you deserve, whether that's good or bad. It just goes on and on. It's so hard for us, humanly speaking, to think outside that box, but that is what it is in our relationship with our Lord. All right. So we got to get through chapter 22 yet, and I haven't broken it down because we kind of got a little behind. My hope is that we finish in the next 2 weeks, because the week after that, July 4th weekend, Pastor Don Duberstein will be here as I'll be away that weekend. And I really would like to get Revelation done before he comes so we don't have to take a week off for when he's here. And not sure if he's going to be doing anything between the services yet. I got to communicate with him. So let us pray. May the blessing of the eternal God be on us as we work and worship, His light to guide us, His presence to strengthen us, His peace to unite us now and forever. Amen.